Good afternoon, ghouls and fiends. That's right, it's the afternoon at time of recording. It's weird, it's daylight outside, who'd have thought it? Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tez, and we are back to our pre-recorded show. This is the second time of doing this, and yeah, it feels quite nice not to be kind of rushing around, as I've kind of said before. You know, quite a chill, relaxed approach to doing this format of the Ministry of Horror. I had a great time on last week's show talking all things. Well, we had a ton of reviews to go through, some good, some terrible, varying qualities, as is always the case. Really enjoyed my conversation with Lawrence in the week where we recorded a review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and we had so much fun chatting about it that we ended up doing a whole extended chat, a spoiler cast. Reception for both shows has been really good, so thank you once again to Lawrence Case for coming on. Always a pleasure to talk Ghostbusters and just have a general catch up. I think I speak for everyone and say we're looking forward to whatever output you have next, and I know that tonight at time of recording, 5th of April, he's going to be going live with Mel on Unexplained Possibilities podcast, Crimson Mel. I believe that is 9 p.m. that goes out live, so this show will have hit the YouTube airwaves and the podcast airwaves prior to that. So if you are listening to this, be sure to go on YouTube, search for Unexplained Possibilities, and check out Crimson Mel's show with Lawrence, talking about a couple of ghost hunts he has been on recently. So he did give me a bit of an exclusive. I'm obviously not going to talk about it here, but he sort of spoke to me about what occurred, and it sounds pretty wild, so be sure to tune in to that. So we don't have too much in regards to general kind of updates, general sort of chit-chat prior to going into today's show. The main thing that kind of came up after last week's show was we went to do our usual watch party. We watched Pumpkinhead, which is a great classic underseen, underappreciated horror of the 80s. Stan Winston directorial debut, I believe, starring Lance Henriksen, the sci-fi horror legend. But there was a notification on Twitch that startled me to my core, and that is that Twitch, I believe at time of recording now, have stopped the ability to do watch parties. Now, watch parties is kind of what got me into Twitch in the first place. I've never been a pro video gamer. I do enjoy my video games, but video game streaming, I've done it intermittently. Football Manager, Final Fantasy, or whatnot. I never know which game is going to find an audience, or if I can be, engaging in that regard. It's not really my skill set. So I would do watch parties, had a great times, during lockdown. I really got into that whole world, and that then ultimately led me to getting the opportunity from the then Ministry of Slam, now Wrestling Arena, when they had the MOS network, to do Ministry of Horror. So it's a real shame, kind of sad, really. So that isn't going to stop future live stream shows. We're still going to have the same schedule of every other week is live, every other week every other week is pre-recorded. But in terms of what we do after the show, not sure. I believe Discord. I think in Discord you can do a watch party potentially, and that may open up more avenues, outside of Prime, because Prime, all of the good stuff it also has so much more bad stuff. So it's a real kind of toss up as to what is available to stream, to watch party on there. Not sure. We'll need to look into it. I don't know the pros and cons and whatnot. And it may be that after the show, for the next few shows, we just have a bit of chatting, just play some music, some streamable music, and have a bit of a chat, like to sort of unwind after the show. Maybe jump into some horror gaming. Maybe I have a horror game to focus on. I mean, the difficulty that I always find is when I search horror games on Steam, because I just find it a bit easier to stream in this setup on the computer. It either looks like trash, or it's purely multiplayer, or it's purely multiplayer trash. It's just not really for me. But I've heard about a few good things coming out, good games coming out soon, and there's plenty of classics that I've not really touched. So who knows? Who knows? Maybe that's the route we'll go. Not sure. I mean, I could probably just stop being lazy and hook my Xbox up to my capture card. It isn't actually that difficult, but it's just a faff. I don't like unplugging things and plugging. It's just, I'm just lazy. Or find a good HDMI splitter, but I've tried to use one before and the signal was just shit. It kept, you have to have it on a low resolution, otherwise it was just flickery. I just did my nutting. So, yeah, who knows what we will do instead of watch parties going forward, but that won't have any impact on your general enjoyment of the podcast. If you're a podcast listener, YouTube viewer, obviously it'll have no implications there, not to worry. Podcast streams again are still looking pretty good. I mean, the Late Night with the Devil show has just been 3-4 times over the most successful episode that we've done today. It's really incredible that it's just, normally with my shows you get a number of listens throughout the week at the point of release, and then you may get the odd listen here and there in future weeks. Usually it means that someone's come across the show and is going through a bit of the backlog, or someone has searched for a term specific to a previous show, has listened to that show, as opposed to the most recent. But every day there's just multiple listens of Late Night with the Devil. So it's just a massive thank you to everyone who has listened to it, who has shared it to friends. I don't know those metrics, but it's just very cool to see that it's still doing well. And it's like 4 times, almost 5 times over the most listened to episode. I don't know if that is of all time, because I don't have the metrics for when the show was getting released directly to the MOS network feed, which obviously reached a much larger audience because it was part of the Ministry of Slam, now Wrestling Arena podcast feed, which had quite a big reach. At times it was charting in like the top 50 in different markets, different areas of the world, like the UK or whatever, of wrestling podcasts. Now, whether wrestling fans are also horror fans, there's a little bit of a crossover, but I don't know how big that is. But again, I don't know in lifetime if it's the most listened to, but I certainly know in terms of my podcast feed, it's hugely successful. So thank you very much again. So in regards to today's show, we've got a few news things to go through, and then we've got a few reviews. Now, these podcast shows are the ones where we'll do a retro review. We're kind of doing all three are varying degrees of retro, whether that's 4 years, whether that's 10 years, whether that's 50 years. I think 4 years, probably 20 years, and 50 years, realistically. I don't know the exact dates. But I haven't watched a new film in the last week. The last new film I saw was Immaculate, which we reviewed on last week's show. I've had a couple of looks here and there as to what's available on like Sky Store, Amazon Prime Store. And the closest thing to a new film is purchasing for a reduced price Night Swim. And I figured I'd rather just rent it for a couple of quid than spend a tenner on it. And it's not new. Well, it is new, but it's not new. So we haven't got a new film to review, but what we will be reviewing in our retro triplet is Haunt, which has recently hit Netflix UK. And I think I've talked about it on a recent show in terms of it being well worth checking out. I gave it a rewatch, so I thought, hey, let's review it. As previously mentioned, The Abominable Dr Phibes. I had a recommendation from a family member of Victoria's to give that a go for some classic horror. And then I picked up, and it's downstairs, so I can't grab it to hand, but I picked up on a Zavvi sale a couple of box sets. One is the Arrow Video Store, which has got 5 films in it, including Dolls and Arena, and I think Dungeon Master or something like that. Haven't watched any of those, but the other box set I got is the On The Grudge box set. It's one I've been looking at for a little while because I really want to just... I've never seen the original... Well, I've never seen any of those films, the original Japanese language ones. I've only seen the American remake, which I wasn't that fussed with, to be honest. Just the first one, I think there's been a couple. 2 or 3, not sure. But the first one had Sarah Michelle Gellar in it, I know that. So I picked that up. They had it reduced. It was like down from like 60 quid to like 25. which I thought was pretty good, and then this Arena box set. So I think I'm going to be plumbing from the Arena box set in coming episodes some classic films to review, like Dolls. Arena's more sci-fi. Not the Arena box set, the Arrow video store box set. I just get words mixed up. Don't correct me on it, because I'll just take it to heart. We're going to be looking at those, but yeah, I think I'm going to include in this week's reviews On The Grudge, a first-time watch for me. Got some thoughts. We'll talk about it when we get to it. Now it's that time for everyone's favourite jingle. It's time for the horror news. This is the news. There we go. This is the horror news. As per usual, this all comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Check out their website. Check them out on Twitter. All good stuff. First up, this comes from John Squires, bloodydisgusting.com. 5 new horror movie releases this week, including Easter Bloody Easter. So, from Fathom Events, the slasher sequel, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, was released into theatres on March 26th, but the bad news here is that the film was only playing in theatres for 3 days. Stay tuned for an at-home release date. In the film from director Rhys Frake Waterfield, deep within the 100-acre wood, a destructive rage grows as Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Owl and Tigger find their home and their lives endangered after Christopher Robin revealed their existence. Not wanting to live in the shadows any longer, the group decides to take the fight to the town of Ashton, home of Christopher Robin, leaving a bloody trail of death and mayhem in their wake. Winnie and his savage friends will show everyone that they're deadlier, stronger, and smarter than anyone could have ever imagined and get their revenge on Christopher Robin once and for all. The cast of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2 includes Tallulah Evans, Alina Desmond, Scott Chambers as Christopher Robin, Ryan Oliver as Winnie the Pooh, and Peter D'Souza Fahony as Young Pooh. Matt Leslie, who did Summer of '84, which is actually pretty good, wrote the screenplay for the slasher sequel. I've heard that Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2 exceeds expectations in comparison to the original. I haven't seen the original. I've really not got much interest in it. Maybe at some point I will do a show on these now public domain classic kids characters being turned into, quite frankly, dog-shite looking low-budget horror films. But I really don't have an interest in watching things that look kind of almost purposefully shonky. I don't know, or just when it seems like it's when it seems like there's just been a case of, look, let's just do a cash grab for the sake of it, then there's no merit there. It's not. I haven't heard good things. But it does seem like apparently the sequel is a step up. Does that mean I'll watch it? I mean, who knows? Like, I had no interest. We talked about it so much, but I've had no interest really in watching Terrifier 2 until I heard lots of good things about it, and then I gave it a watch. Glad I did. But going into it, couldn't really care. Who knows? Maybe that's the same thing here. Next up, there haven't been all that many Easter-themed horror movies over the years, with most fans agreeing that Mick Garris's Critters 2 still remains the definitive Easter horror movie. The good news? A brand new Easter horror movie has added itself to the mix this week with the indie effort Easter Bloody Easter, now available for rental on VOD outlets. Here's the official synopsis. The film follows Jeannie, Diane Foster, who, after discovering her husband missing and his car wrecked with blood and fur, embarks on a journey with her friend Carol to uncover the truth behind the town's dark legend of the killer Jackalope, a shape-shifting human-rabbit hybrid that terrorized the area a century and a half ago. Now Jeannie and Carol must team up with professional bunny slayer Megan to save their small Texan town on the eve of celebrating Easter Palooza and stop the Jackalope once and for all. From what we gather, the team is hoping that Easter Bloody Easter will launch a franchise, but that of course depends on how many people pluck down their money to check it out. It sounds ridiculous, but I guess after seeing Zombieva many years ago, there is an element of interest in that this could be quite a fun, silly creature feature where you've made a murderous animal out of a ridiculous concept. It's entirely possible. I mean, it could also be absolute crap, but that does, you know, I'm not completely turned off by that synopsis for Easter, Bloody Easter. Again, I'm not expecting it to win any awards, but who knows? After scaring up 30 million at the worldwide box office, Blumhouse and Lionsgate's new horror movie Imaginary is now available for premium VOD rental and purchase this week. It's available to buy for $24.99 to rent from $19.99. DeWanda Wise stars in Imaginary. Jessica moves back into her childhood home with her family. Her younger stepdaughter Alice develops an eerie attachment to a stuffed bear named Chauncey she finds in the basement. Alice starts playing games with Chauncey that begin playful and become increasingly sinister. As Alice's behaviour becomes more and more concerning, Jessica intervenes only to realise Chauncey is much more than the stuffed toy bear she believed him to be. The film stars Tom Payne, Tegan Burns, Piper Braun, Veronica Falcon and Betty Buckler. The screenplay is by Jeff Wardlow and Greg Ebb and Jason Orumland. So we talked about Imaginary, we reviewed it previously. I can't remember what I gave it, like a 6 out of 10, I think. I don't think it's a film as bad as some outlets have made it out to be. That said, I do think watch the trailer. You'll have a good idea of the type of film you get in it. The trailer doesn't really missell it, in my opinion, in terms of, you know, it's not a super scary film. It's fine. You know, it's fine. It's got a couple of good moments. I think the finale, like the last 20 minutes, is pretty good. But it's not brilliant. Next up, Universal's Dark Universe may have gone up in flames right out of the gate, but that's not stopping other studios from unofficially making their own Universal monster mashups. All the classic monsters unite to brawl in the Asylum's Monster Mash, now available on VOD. All you need to know is it's an Asylum picture. That tells me everything. Who brings them all together, you ask? Michael Madsen, of course. In Monster Mash, a dying Dr. Frankenstein is determined to meld the world's strongest monsters into a singular, unstoppable creation. Now the monsters, including Dracula, Werewolf, and the Invisible Man, must work together to stop him before it's too late. The film is written and directed by Jose Prendes, who did The Exorcists. Yeah, I mean, it's an Asylum film. What more is there to say? It's probably going to have some level of entertainment in just how bad it is. It may well be a so bad it's good sort of film. It's not going to be a it's good film. I mean, the artwork alone looks absolute shite. Michael Madsen, I mean, he's one of those actors who hit it big with a few Tarantino roles. And outside of that, I don't want to be too disparaging of a man's career, but outside of that, he's been involved in a lot of absolute tosh. I think we know what we're getting with that. Now, moving on, Legendary's epic-sized monsterverse is back on the big screen with Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, which teams up the two titans to battle a world-ending threat. Rebecca Hall is back as Dr. Eileen Andrews, with Brian Tyree Henry also returning as Bernie Hayes, and they'll be joined in Godzilla x Kong by Dan Stevens. Adam Wingard, who previously held Godzilla vs. Kong, directs Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, which features a screenplay by Terry Rossio and Simon Barrett, and Jeremy Slater, from a story by Russo and Wingard and Barrett. The latest entry in the MonsterVerse franchise follows up the explosive showdown of Godzilla vs. Kong with an all-new cinematic adventure pitting the almighty Kong and the fearsome Godzilla against a colossal undiscovered threat hidden within our world, challenging their very existence and our own. The epic new film will delve further into the histories of these titans, their origins, and the mysteries of Skull Island and beyond, while uncovering the mythic battle that helped forge these extraordinary beings and tied them to humankind forever. Kaylee Hottle, Alex Hearns, and Fala Chen also star. Yeah, the legendary MonsterVerse isn't something that really interests me. I like the Godzilla film from, God, I don't know when it was released, like the early 2010s, I want to say, the one that had the proposed, no, I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, James Bond, Aaron Taylor Johnson. And Bryan Cranston was in it. That was pretty good, I thought. I have seen bits and pieces of like Godzilla King of the Monsters. Wasn't really for me. Godzilla versus Kong just didn't. It didn't look. It looked more like modern Transformers in terms of big CGI spectacle, spinning around cameras. Everything's a huge, massive CGI spectacle. Doesn't really interest me when the focus is purely on CGI things, throwing things through the air, and all this, that, and the other. Not that fussed. I haven't got a problem per se with CGI. I think when it's used for enhancement or for things that just can't be done practically, sure. And yeah, of course, these things couldn't be done practically well, I guess. I don't know. But it just hasn't really interested me. And the trailers for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, don't look at all like that's going to change my opinion anytime soon. But if you're fans of the MonsterVerse, then that is out now. And that is it for the new horror releases. So moving on, new gameplay has been released for Cursed Bet. Immerse yourself in the creepiness. This comes from Mike Wilson, bloody disgusting. Lightworker Games has updated fans on the developer's upcoming body cam horror title, Cursed Bet, dropping a new gameplay trailer that hits 11 on the creepiness scale almost immediately, and that's without the game's cursed doll making an appearance until well into the trailer. The trailer obviously does more than creep viewers out, as it demonstrates some of the puzzles you'll be faced with as you explore the abandoned preschool, along with examining items for clues as to what went on at the school. But the real pull-up for the trailer is the unnerving moments that heighten the dread as you navigate the building, which may or may not be quite as abandoned as you are led to believe. In Cursed Bet, you play as Davin. Davin is told by his friends about an abandoned preschool where horrific events were said to have taken place. The story goes that a doll in the preschool was cursed, causing it to come to life and proceed to wreak havoc, resulting in the school being closed. The rumour is that the cursed doll is still there, and that bad things happen to those who enter the school. Naturally, Davin doesn't believe his friends and enters the school on a dare, recording a video to prove them wrong. You know what happens next. Still no release date yet for Cursed Bet, though if you're itching to experience some of the gameplay yourself, you can play the demo, which is currently up on the Steam page. Yeah, I quite like the look of this. Firstly, the fact that it's not being sold as a isometric multiplayer game. Body cam horror sounds quite interesting, and it kind of looks a bit like when you get those Urbex videos, which is urban exploration. Some of them are very, very good at being very, very creepy. Some of them try to do the set up horror, and it always comes across as fake and phony and cheesy. There's been ones before where I've seen people go into these abandoned warehouses at night and then see some creepy person in a mask running at them. And I get what they're going for, like, oh, we're just in some urban exploration. Did not expect this to happen. And oh no, we're being chased, we're being attacked. Spooky things are happening, oh God. But you lose all credibility for that when you're running away and then you turn back filming the person running after you, because yeah, you're getting cool footage, but ultimately if you're trying to play this off as being real, why would you be turning the camera around to look behind you? You'd almost forget the camera's there because you'd be bolting it for the door to try and get away because you think your life may be threatened. And I've seen a few of those. I'd much prefer you don't have any sort of setup of something weird being there, but just you're going into this location and finding creepy things. I think that's much, much, much cooler. Because it's also authentic as well. At least it comes across as that way. I'm gonna have to check this out. I think what I'm gonna need to do, I'm not gonna open up Steam now. I mean, I am recording. I could always pause. And and play this off. I mean, that's the joys of recording and not being live. But I don't know. You come for my unprofessionalism. I like to think. I've made a note of it. Cursed Bet. I'm going to check out the Steam. No doubt when I finish the show, I'll look at my little note and go, what? What's that? Next up, we have more gaming news. Folk horror game Harvest Hunt launches May 22nd with an updated demo now available. Villainous Game Studios has narrowed down that May 24 release date for their upcoming folk horror game Harvest Hunt. Players will get to enjoy the harvest on May 22nd on PC via Via Steam. In anticipation, the team has released an updated demo for Harvest Hunt, offering a tantalizing taste of survival horror mixed with roguelike gameplay. Harvest Hunt centers around the village of Luna Nova. Death awaits the village every harvest season. You have been chosen as the next warden in order to protect the villagers from the creatures that threaten to devour them, and to ensure the villagers' survival by gathering the precious resources they need to survive. Delving into a narrative steeped in European folklore, you will don the warden's mask and brave the farmlands around Luna Nova. Over the course of 5 nights, you must survive... Okay, where's this going? You must survive the malevolent curse that suffocates Luna Nova. Seal your fate each night by drawing cards, known as whispers, to unlock otherworldly abilities and modifiers that may help or hinder you in your vigil, affecting both the environment and the devourer stalking your every move. I think we watched the trailer for this a little while ago, and I remember thinking, oh, that sounds interesting. And the art style really wasn't for me. It was a bit too cartoony. Not my bag, baby. Just going to be honest there. But if that is your sort of thing, that's coming out May 22nd. Okay, a few more bits of news to go through. Talking about the monster movies, or the Titan monster fighting movies. Ape X Mecha Ape, New World Order. Trailer for the mockbuster Titans join forces to fight a knockoff Cthulhu. This comes from John Squires. Bloody disgusting. With the Legendary's big-budget Hollywood blockbuster Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire dominating the box office, you knew it wouldn't be long before The Asylum whipped up their own mockbuster version of the film. Their answer to Godzilla x Kong, it's titled Ape X Mecha Ape: New World Order, a sequel to last year's Ape vs. Mecha Ape Naturally. Ape X Mecha Ape New World Order will be available on digital beginning April 5th, and it pits the two titular titans up against, well, a mockbuster take on Lovecraft's Cthulhu, naturally. In Ape X Mecha Ape, I fucking hate that title, a global cabal of world leaders awakens an ancient creature beneath the ocean floor. Now mankind's only hope rests on an uneasy alliance between the giant ape and his mechanical arch-nemesis Mecha Ape Mark II to save the Earth. Sean Young, Ashley Takin, and Jarrett River star in The Asylum's latest mockbuster. It was directed by Mark Gottlieb, who did Ape vs. Mecha Ape. Cool. I mean, I guess it's news. We'll move on. I don't think there's much to discuss there. Abigail, second trailer, promises to eat you alive. Now, this is one I am hyped for. Tickets are on sale. Well, Universal Pictures' Abigail, poised to unleash a gory good time at the theatre. Brand new trailer has arrived just ahead of the film's theatrical release. Releasing April 19th, Abigail has been rated R for strong bloody violence and gore throughout, pervasive language and brief drug use, and it's not hard to see why either. Abigail is gearing up to deliver an epic bloodbath. Watch the new trailer below, where Abigail promises to eat you alive. In the film, after a group of would-be criminals kidnap the 12-year-old ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, all they have to do to collect the 50 million ransom is watch the girl overnight. In an isolated mansion, the captors start to dwindle one by one, and they discover, to their mounting horror, that they're locked inside with no normal little girl. From Radio Silence, the directing team of Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, behind the terrifying modern horror hits Ready or Not, 2022 Scream, and last year's Scream 6, comes a brash, bloodthirsty new vision of the vampire flick. Written by Stephen Shields, who did The Hole in the Ground and Zombie Bashers, and Guy Busick, who did Scream franchise entries and Ready or Not. Abigail stars Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Catherine Newton, William Catlett, Kevin Durand, and Angus Cloud as the kidnappers, and Alicia Weir as Abigail. So if people haven't seen this trailer, I definitely recommend checking it out. Trailer looks pretty good. It looks pretty full-on and gory in places. The actual Abigail vampire fangs, I think, look really quite cool and look like it's going to be quite brutal. The fact that it's from Radio Silence, I really kind of like the work they've done. They've also done work on VHS. I think the first entry, maybe also the second. I think that they've definitely done part of VHS 1. It's a pretty good cast. I mean, Dan Stevens has been in quite a few things. I think he was in The Guest and Godzilla x Kong. Melissa Barrera as well, of course, from Scream. So it's definitely one I'm going to be checking out. I'm going to hopefully get to the cinema to watch that. At some point, I hope to get, you know, funds permitting. I hope to get to the cinema to watch The First Omen, because the reception coming out for that sounds pretty good. So I will see what I can do about seeing that in the next week or so. Next up, New Life trailer introduces genre-bending apocalyptic tension. This comes from Megan Navarro. From the producers of Something in the Dirt and the Mortuary collection comes New Life, a tense thriller of apocalyptic proportions. Brainstorm Media has unveiled a new trailer for the genre bender, teasing some of the apocalyptic thrills. New Life arrives in theatres and on demand May 3rd. The feature debut by writer-director John Rossman and stars Sonia Walger, Haley Erin, and Tony Amendola. Watch the new trailer and check out the poster below on Blood Disgusting site. New Life follows a mysterious woman on the run and the resourceful fixer assigned to bring her in. As the two stories inexorably link anyone listening is probably just what the hell, mushmouth? The stakes of their pursuit rise to apocalyptic proportions. Michelle Schwartzstein, CEO of Brainstorm Media, expresses excitement about the acquisition. New Life is an impressive debut from John Rossman that will captivate audiences in unexpected ways. It's not often we see a film in the genre reveal such depth and complexity. We are honoured and excited to present this very special film. It doesn't sound super horror. You know, the post-apocalyptic kind of landscape or apocalyptic thrills. It doesn't really mention it's proper post-apocalyptic, but you normally just associate that when you hear apocalyptic. Just assume it's post. But it sounds kind of interesting enough. It's certainly not kind of grabbed my attention entirely. But one to keep an eye out for if you like that kind of apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic setting. And finally on the news, Christian Bale becomes Frankenstein's monster in first look at The Bride movie. Well, that's The Bride with an exclamation point. This comes from John Squires. Director Maggie Gyllenhaal is bringing the iconic Bride of Frankenstein back to life for upcoming feature film The Bride. And we've got two first look images for you this morning. The Bride will release in theatres on October 3rd, 2025. Meet Christian Bale's Frankenstein's monster above, along with a first look at Jessie Buckley as the titular bride below. The upcoming film sees a lonely Frankenstein travel to 1930s Chicago to seek the aid of a Dr. Euphronius in creating a companion for himself. The two reinvigorate a murdered young woman and the bride is born. She is beyond what either of them intended, igniting a combustible romance, the attention of the police, and a wild and radical social movement. The Bride will also star Penelope Cruz, Peter Sarsgaard, and Annette Bening. In the original 1935 film from director James Whale, after recovering from injuries sustained in the mob attack upon himself and his creation, Dr. Frankenstein falls under the control of his former mentor, Dr. Pretorius, who insists the now chastened doctor resume his experiments in creating new life. Meanwhile, the monster remains on the run from those who wish to destroy him, without understanding that his intentions are generally good despite his lack of socialization and self-control. Okay, I mean, this is a great cast. Christian Bale has done some incredible performances in his time, and Jessie Buckley, I think, is really getting out there. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the was it Alex Garland, I think, film Men that she starred in, but I think her performance was really quite exceptional in that. Just generally, the film itself was good, but it's one of those films where I enjoyed it. I wasn't blown away by it. I couldn't really explain what exactly was going on. And I guess maybe that might be partially the point, or it's entirely open for interpretation. Visually, it was very interesting, but her performance was great. And she's done a few things. I think she's in a film called Beast, like an indie film called Beast that I saw a few years ago that was her performance was very good. The film itself was fine. I've always found it quite interesting with The Bride of Frankenstein that The Bride of Frankenstein's image in its first appearance is so iconic, but its screen time is like barely 5 minutes from memory. And I remember seeing The Bride of Frankenstein when I've bought and sold about 50 times the Universal Monsters box set. I don't know if I've still got a copy or if I've sold it again. Who knows? But when the first time I watched The Bride of Frankenstein, I just remember thinking, I don't think it's as good as the first film. And obviously, again, it's a different era, 1930s horror. But I remember thinking, I don't really understand the whole overblown euphoria people have of The Bride of Frankenstein. It's a very interesting look, but it amounts to like 5 minutes of total screen time. That doesn't necessarily always mean it's a bad thing. You get it with some creatures or whatever that only feature on the screen very briefly but become iconic. But to me, I was very quite underwhelmed with Bride of Frankenstein as a film and as a creation, I guess. But I haven't. I don't know if this is Maggie Gyllenhaal's directorial debut. I don't know if I've read that or if she's done other features before, but she's a good actress. I will watch this open-mindedly. I think the imagery for both characters looks quite interesting. The Maggie Gyllenhaal image, not the Maggie Gyllenhaal image, the Jessie Buckley image, looks like she's got ink or something across her face. Not quite sure what that is. Whereas Christian Bale's Frankenstein kind of looks a bit more traditional, stitched up, with the bolts across the head, not the bolts, but the massive staples across the forehead. We shall see. I'm going to watch it with an open mind. And anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's horror news. That was the news. Oh, oh, oh. Let it play out so I can have a drink. That's enough. So we are going to start off today's horror film reviews, our retro triplet of horror film reviews, by going all the way back to 1971. This is what I mentioned that I would be doing as the next retro review on a previous show. And we've gone with The Abominable Dr Phibes. The Abominable Dr Phibes is a 1971 British comedy horror film directed by Robert Fust, written by James Whitten and William Goldstein, and starring Vincent Price and Joseph Cotton. Its Art Deco sets, dark humour, and performance by Price have made the film and its sequel, Dr Phibes Rises Again, cult classics. The film also features Hugh Griffith and Terry Thomas, with an uncredited Caroline Munro appearing as Phibes' wife. The film follows the title character, Dr. Anton Phibes, who blames the medical team that attended to his wife's surgery 4 years prior for her death and sets out to exact vengeance on each one. Phibes is inspired in his murderous spree by the 10 plagues of Egypt from the Old Testament. However, the 10 plagues in the film considerably differ from those in the literary Old Testament. Some plagues were dropped, new plagues were added, and even those plagues which remain the same are ordered differently, such as the death of the firstborn no longer being the final plague. Okay, so let's sort of get into the first sort of bit of the plot, and then I'll talk about my thoughts after having watched it. Dr. Anton Phibes, a famous concert organist with doctorates in both music and theology, is believed to have been killed in a car crash in Switzerland in 1921 while racing home upon hearing of the death of his beloved wife Victoria during surgery. Phibes, though, survived the crash but was horribly scarred and left unable to speak. He remade his face with prosthetics and used his knowledge of acoustics to regain his voice. Resurfacing secretly in London in 1925, Phibes believes his wife was the victim of her doctor's incompetence and begins elaborate plans to kill those he believes are guilty for her death. Aided in his quest for vengeance by his beautiful and silent assistant Valnavia, Phibes uses the 10 plagues of Egypt as his inspiration, wearing an amulet with Hebrew letters corresponding with each plague as he conducts the murders. So, it's quite a campy film. I don't know if that's necessarily, it's not like played for laughs, but the set designs are quite elaborate and, as mentioned, Art Deco, and very kind of overtly indulgent. He performs with like his own sort of little mini orchestra, but they're all, as far as I can tell, puppets performing, just fake performing recordings of concertos and whatnot, while he plays an organ, going mad on the keys at the top of these stairs. It's never really discussed much about his assistant, Vesulius, yeah, it doesn't really kind of go too much into who that is. Wait, have I got that name right? Oh no, not Vasil. It's Valnavia. There we go. I'm getting the names mixed up here. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't really know who she is or why she works with him. That was a bit odd. I kept expecting her to turn out to be a robot or something. I don't know why. I think it's because when we see Dr. Phibes without his face on near the end, he looks almost kind of cybertronic and like a living ghoul. Yeah, we don't really get an answer to that as far as I'm aware. I was kind of watching this in segments, I'll be honest. 20 minutes here, half an hour there. One thing I will say is the very sort of finale, it's kind of almost set up as like a mixture of like a James Bond villain and Saw, in terms of Phibes gets the detective or the officer's firstborn son, hooks him up to this machine where he's got like a key lodged in him to unlock this contraption, which when the contraption is full, it will drop basically acid blood onto his son, onto this detective's son. And it did feel like a campy version of Saw. So whether Saw played any sort of whether the Abominable Dr Phibes played any sort of influence on, you know, on Saw, I don't know. Maybe it's deemed a cult classic, so possibly. I mean, there's some fun to be had with this film. The music is quite decent. It's very of the time. It's very much, you know, if you're not really a fan of older films, like films from the 70s or early 70s, you probably won't enjoy The Abominable Dr Phibes. It's not super full of horror. I mean, there's a couple of deaths that are quite sudden with some blood, but it's not drenched in it by any means. Even the finale with the acid blood, when that does play a part, you don't actually see it playing a part. And whether that's a limitation of the budget, the era that this was filmed, quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, Vincent Price is Vincent Price in this. He doesn't have that much to do. Like, a lot of the time, his involvement is you're seeing the back of his head or him with a cloak up. You don't actually see too much of Vincent Price. And because he's lost the ability to talk and he's basically talking through acoustics, he has like this thing attached to him which goes into like a speaker. You don't get that much animation from Vincent Price in this. It's fine. Yeah, if you're a fan of the films of the year and you haven't seen it, give it a check. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10, just because I think giving it like a 6 or up would make it seem like I enjoyed it more than I did. I think it's fine, but it ultimately didn't. It wasn't super memorable for me. It very much felt like the sort of film you might catch, like a horror version of the sort of film you might catch at 2 p.m. on Channel 4, BBC 2 back in the day. Like an afternoon film from the 50s, 60s, 70s that would be played on a terrestrial TV channel when, you know, if you were growing up in the 90s, 2000s. Best way I can describe it. Which may sound a bit derogatory, but it's not meant to be. Next in my reviews, I reviewed the 2019 film, or I watched to review the 2019 horror film slasher, Haunt, written, directed by Scott Beck and Brian Wood. So if you didn't know, also wrote A Quiet Place, Nightlife, which I don't think I've seen, and 65, the recent 65 million years ago film. The film stars Katie Stevens, Will Britton, and Lauren McLean. Set on a Halloween night, it follows a group of friends who encounter a haunted house that promises to feed on their darkest fears, unknowing that the performers have a murderous intent. Haunt premiered at the Popcorn Frights Fest on August 8th, 2019, and subsequently had a limited release in the United States. On Halloween night in Carbondale, Illinois, roommates Harper and Bailey attend a party together where they meet their friends Angela and Mallory. The group befriends two guys, Nathan and Evan, at a local bar. Throughout the night, Harper suspects she is being stalked by a man in a devil mask. The group encounters a haunted house attraction, but before they enter, they have to surrender their cell phones and sign liability waivers. The group becomes separated after entering a maze. Bailey, Nathan, and Angela encounter a series of armholes. Bailey sticks her arm inside. It is slashed with a straight razor. She also accidentally loses Harper's mum's ring, which she was wearing. Harper and Evan lose Mallory. They meet back up with others and witness a performer in a witch mask. This is jumping ahead quite a bit in this write-up. I'll just say they encounter and witness a performer in a witch mask. So, first things first with this film, for like an unknown at the time that I watched it, and I originally watched it during COVID. I think it came on Sky. We talked about it briefly on a previous show. That was meant to be briefly on a previous show. And the first thing is, like, I saw this appear on like the Sky store, or it might have been on just Sky Player. Didn't know anything about it, hadn't heard anything about it. Produced by Eli Roth, which I thought, was that a good thing or a bad thing? And at this stage, who knows? At that stage, I should say, of 2019, 2020 sort of time. And as soon as the film started up, it already feels like either it's got a budget behind it or it's got people who know what they're doing in the industry. I don't know what the budget was for this film, but I don't think it was huge. But it's shot brilliantly. Like, it really does have this neatness to the way that it's been shot. And you're seeing the setup with these various characters with these kind of typical haunted house masks, but they're well made. They don't look like they were bought for, a pack of 5 for $2. Like, there is a creepiness with each of these masks because they've got that kind of, I guess, like mesh over the eye holes, so the eye holes are just completely black. You don't see anyone's eyes while they've got the masks on. The main characters are all pretty entertaining. Harper, Bailey, Nathan, Angela, Mallory. There's one guy who seems like a bit of a loudmouth knob, but his is all right actually. I think that's Evan, or Nathan. Oh, Evan. There we go. Yeah, he sounds like your typical kind of like bro type in, like kind of the, I suppose, the comic relief, you could say. And when they're all introduced, all the characters are fine, all the acting's fine, there's no one that stands out as bad. And we get to the haunted house, and even just the first performer, in quotation marks, that they meet, the clown, just creepy, and all he's doing is standing there, holds out his hands, one of the characters, for them to pick a hand. Pick a hand, it's empty. Pick the other hand, it's empty. And then he just pulls a key from behind their ear, which goes to this lockbox where they've got to put their phones. But the interesting thing with the phones is not just that, and their wallets and whatnot. It's not just that they aren't called for help because their phones are taken away, but it's also that the people running this now have all of their information, like social security, driving license will have the address on, things like that. And as they're going through this house, there's some creepy things here and there, but it does not hold back on the violence. And it's the sort of violence in a horror film you don't need to linger on shots. There's a moment when there's a couple of people that get stabbed in the head. Both times are shocking. Both times it's not played for gratuity. It happens, you see it for a second, it moves on. But by doing that, you get the sudden impact of reality and terror without it being over the top and losing its impact. The moment that always stood out for me the first time I saw this, there's a couple of moments actually. One person gets their face ripped off with a hammer. And again, it happens for a second, split second. And when it's happening, you're just like, oh, fucking hell. But the impact of that is starting to understand what is going on here. You don't get full answers, but you kind of learn enough through the dialogue. When some of these characters, some that are masked up, start taking off their masks, their faces are horrifying, in that they have been modifying their faces to look like their masks. There's a guy called Mitch, he's the only person that we learn their name of, who seems like he's being helpful, but has murderous intentions. And at one point they're saying to him, like, you know, show us your real face, tell us your whole name, you know, Mitch, what's your surname? Show us your face. And later on, when he encounters one of the characters outside and he has a claw hammer, he says to them, do you still want to see my face? It's a bit of a work in progress. And he's wearing like a ghost sort of mask. And when he takes the mask off, his face has been modified. Like his eye, I can't describe it, but his face has been modified to almost look similar to his ghost mask. You know, darkness around the eyes, like almost like kind of burnt. It's truly very creepy. The clown, his face is modified up and tattooed, and, you know, I don't know how to describe all the different terms with modification, but there's a devil character who has horns implanted into his head, and he has this tattooing around his mouth to make it all black, and his eyes have been, I don't know if it's contact lenses or if he's had his eyes tattooed, I think that's a thing, to be completely black. The characters are even creepier when they take off the masks, which I think is really unique, because quite often when you have things like this, you take off the mask, it's just a person underneath, and that's fine, because sometimes it's even more terrifying. But it's the fact that they feel that their mask is, I guess, representing them, and they see the people that are trapped in the haunted house, because ultimately this is an escape room haunted house type attraction, but it's screwed up. There's a few moments where they're saying, like, let's take your mask off, and it's basically just they're going to take their face off. It's nasty in places, but it runs with such a good level of tension. We get quite a rounded up story with this. Nothing is really left too much to wonder about. It does a pretty good job of kind of completing the story, but whilst that was a bit of a, not a complaint, but when it was announced that we're getting a Ready or Not 2, and I felt with Ready or Not that the story had been rounded up enough there, with this film the story's rounded up well enough by the finale, but I've kind of got a bit of a hankering for a sequel, and looking online there are discussions, or as of last year there were discussions for a Haunt 2. And that is because with Ready or Not, we get a pretty good understanding of what is going on and what is the cause for that, and it feels like everything's tied up with a bow by the end. With Haunt, we get an idea of what is going on in terms of what the motivations are. Generally, these are killers, but we don't know how big this group goes. We don't know if these are the only people involved. We know that there's been recruits, so who knows where they could go with a sequel idea. I'd be pretty intrigued to see how that follows up. So, highlights for this, I think all the performances are great. Harper's very good in it, who's kind of like the lead. The violence is on point. It's not super gratuitous, but the moments that do occur are, you can't help but squirm a bit, cringe a bit, just because of like what is happening. You know, fire pokers to the face, and just, you know, faces being shot off with shotguns. Yeah, and you get a couple of these moments of peril where a character is trying to escape, but then there's like glue on the floor. They get their hands stuck to nails in the ground, knives hanging off platforms that could then drop at any moment. There's a lot of that kind of good stuff in this. I really enjoy Haunt, and it does seem that now this is on Netflix, it's getting a whole new audience, so hopefully that does lead to speeding up getting a sequel, and hopefully the sequel has the same writer-directors involved, because I think they did a great job with this. So if you haven't already seen Haunt, I would suggest checking it out. It is on Netflix, at least in the UK. I don't know about other markets. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think I was initially going into this thinking 7.5, but really there isn't much that I can mark it down for. It is well done. It is well done. I think we probably could have leaned in a bit more into the story with Harper's background, and also Harper's ex-boyfriend, who plays a role in this film. I don't necessarily think they did enough explaining that relationship. And it's not super important to the story, but I guess it connects to her background, which we do get bits and pieces of information for. But I think that we probably could have done a bit more of an introduction early on in that regard, perhaps. But otherwise, yeah, 8 out of 10 for Haunt. I did enjoy it. And then finally, for the reviews, the retro triplet reviews, I finally got my ass around to watching the 2002 On The Grudge. So I have got the box set. It's downstairs. I don't have it to hand to show, but it's just a simple box set from Arrow. Love their releases. And On The Grudge is a 2002 Japanese supernatural horror film written and directed by Takeshi Shimizu. It's the third installment in the Ju-On series and the first to be released theatrically, the first two being direct-to-video productions. It stars Megumi Okina, Masika Ito, Takashi Matsuyama, and Yui Ichikawa. So, do the usual, talk a bit about the plot. Several years prior to the main plot, Takeo Seiki murders his wife Kyoko after discovering she is in love with another man, also killing the family cat Ma and his son Toshio. The murders create a curse that revives the family as vengeful ghosts, with Kyoko's ghost murdering Takeo. Whoever enters their house in Nerime, Tokyo is eventually consumed by the curse, which spreads to the place they die in and in turn consumes anyone who comes in. The latest owners of the house are the Tokunaga family, consisting of salaryman Katsuya, his wife Kazami, and his ill mother Sachi. Kazumi is quickly consumed by the curse, and Katsuya is emotionally affected by Takeo's personality before dying too. Katsuya's sister Hitomi dies shortly after Kayeko's spirit follows her to her office and then her apartment. So we are following this curse with a number of different people. And I will be honest, I had a bit of difficulty watching this. Not because it's a foreign language film. I mean, I probably could have put dubbing on if I wanted to, but I prefer to watch films with their original language and read the subtitles. No, I decided to watch this film downstairs in the living room with 3 crazy spaniels who take a long time to just settle down and chill out. So at various points, I've got one dog jumping onto me, so I'm then missing the subtitles. Another dog that barks at anything that moves outside, so I've got that distracting. And another dog that's just needy and wants cuddles and gets jealous if I'm cuddling one of the other dogs. So I had that to deal with. So there were moments in the film where I got a little bit sidetracked. But what I can say about this is I recognised some of the scare scenes from the American remake, and I haven't seen the American remake for a very long time, but that's the only Grudge that I have seen, but it was done 10 times better here. I think specifically my favourite part will have been either the scenes with Hitomi when she gets attacked almost in the bathroom and the security guard goes to look to see what's going on, and that whole scene when she's then sort of followed home and she's hiding under her bed, only to see her bed rise and Kayako's spirit is there. That was pretty creepy. There's a moment with the hand in the hair, and initially, because it's quite an iconic scene with the Grudge, initially I was thinking, I think this might have been filmed a bit better in the American version, where it looks like the hand is coming out of the hair. But I think that's almost missing the point, actually, because by the end of the film, when you get a number of these sequences near the end of the film which kind of explain what was going on in some of those earlier scares, and because of that, it then makes a bit more sense why the hand is not coming out of the hair but appearing on top of the hair. It's because the ghost was there. I do think that I probably need to maybe rewatch this at some point without the dogs around, just so I can fully follow the story from start to finish, because there were moments where it was a bit difficult to fully grasp what was occurring or which characters we were with now, because it is quite a segmented film in terms of the different stories that we are covering. But this is quite a creepy film. Do I feel that it was as impactful on me as the first time I saw Ringu? No, I don't think so. But I don't think that's necessarily a negative, because I think Ringu is incredible. I've still never seen the third film, the prequel, so I'm gonna open up Savvy. I'm gonna open up Savvy and Amazon and see what their prices are. Maybe not for this month. Been a very expensive month, but it's always worth checking these things out. Performance-wise, fine. I mean, again, I can't really be too critical or too praising when my attention is taken away by the dogs every 5 minutes. But I generally enjoyed the film. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think, as I say, that it's a film that's kind of almost built around creeping scares, and a lot of it is down to like the audio production. I think this is one of those earlier films where you got that sort of sounds. I don't know if that picked up on the microphone. If not, it's just silence. But this kind of creaking, guttural, strained sounds that really just cut through you. And moments of when you can tell something bad is going to happen, because a character will walk into the house, go up the stairs, and suddenly get this kind of sensation of like a frequency just piercing their ears. Those moments all work quite well, and when you do then see the ghosts appearing, like the ghost kid under a table, and Kayoko sort of descending down the stairs in a really creepy manner. Also, when you just see this kind of black shadow image with these really piercing eyes coming out of it, they're all very creepy. So it's not super jump scare heavy, which I think the American version tried to go for, was quite jump scare heavy from memory. Again, I probably need to rewatch it. This one focuses more on creeping dread, and I do prefer that. So I'm going to give On The Grudge 7.5 out of 10. I will get around to watching the other ones, but I'm not going to just do every retro review as a Grudge film. I'll space them out, and like I say, I'm probably going to do either Dolls or Arena next. Or actually, we did have a request on the Discord, which I probably will do next, which was Stage Fright. There's lovely releases of that from Shameless releasing, I believe, but also it's on Shudder, to the best of my knowledge. So that is it for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Thank you very much for coming along, for listening. If you've enjoyed what you listened to, be sure to follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube if you're catching us up on YouTube. Check us out, Ministry of Horror. You can search there. We're on TikTok, Ministry of Horror. We now sell a t-shirt in various colours and sizes. Go on Etsy and search for Ministry of Horror. You'll find it either all as one word or all together with capital Ministry and capital M for Ministry, capital H for Horror. TikTok I've mentioned, and on X/Twitter is Ministry_Horror, so you can always tweet there to let me know what you enjoyed about the show or things that you'd like to be discussed on future shows. That wraps it up. Thank you for listening, ghouls and fiends, and I will catch you later.